In this Code 0 to 20, we're going to be looking at Workspace Search in VS Code. This deep dive is going to cover everything from the basics of Workspace Search to the different search modes, how you can manage and interact and navigate through different search results, how you can include and exclude specific files from the search results, find and replace within the workspace, and even things like search editors. Now, to keep things manageable, this video is not going to look at searching within an individual text editor, so that's something best left to a different video. And I'm also not going to try to teach you regular expressions or glob patterns. So I'll mention how they can be used. I'll show a few examples of the different regular expressions and glob patterns, but those are, again, things that you kind of need to learn separately and then can apply them to Workspace Search in VS Code. This is going to be a pretty comprehensive look at things, and it should include content for everybody from beginners to really advanced users. So if you're just getting started with VS Code, there should be things for you. If you've been using VS Code for years, hopefully you'll learn a few things along the way as well. If you're already familiar with the section or are looking for something in particular related to Workspace Search, feel free to use the chapter guides to skip to a specific section of the video. So let's get started and look at Workspace Search in VS Code. Workspace Search lets you search through all the contents of your workspace. This includes both files that you currently have open as well as unopened files as well. By default, the search is going to display over here in a view. So you can see I have my search view over here, and I can access it by clicking on the search icon over here in the activity bar. So again, I can just click on this. So going from the Explorer, just click on the big search icon, and then you have the search view that is open. You can also use a keyboard shortcut for this. So if I hover over the activity bar icon here, you can see the key bindings for opening Workspace Search. On Mac, the default key binding is Command-Shift-F. On Windows and Linux, it is Control-Shift-F. So if I was over here on the Explorer, I could press Command-Shift-F or Control-Shift-F, and now I'm in the search view. Now the search view has two parts. Up at the top here, we actually have the search controls. So this is what we are actually going to use to control the search that is happening. Down below here, we have the list of search results. To start a search, you can just start typing. So here I'm going to type in A, B, C, D. And now VS Code is searching through the workspace for any files that contain the text A, B, C, D somewhere in them. You can see there's 170 results that is found across 37 files. If you have a larger workspace or you're performing a more generic search, it might take a little while for the search to complete, in which case you'd see a blue bar going across the top here. So if I go back here, you'll see there's a blue bar going across that's indicating the search is still being performed. Once the search is completed, you should no longer see that bar, and that indicates that the search has gone through the entire contents of the workspace. Now let's say that you're working within a code editor and you find some text that you want to search for in the current workspace. There's actually a useful shortcut you can use to avoid having to type that text out. So in this case, let's say I want to search for the word const editor. So I'll just go and select the text that I'm interested in here. Now I can use the standard Workspace Search keyboard shortcut, which is again Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F, to go and perform a workspace search. So I'll say Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F, and you can see that VS Code has gone and pre-populated the search text here with the selected text from my current code editor. If the search editor was not visible, it would also go and reveal the search editor as well. This is also a good place to note that Workspace Search does consider whitespace when searching. So here you can see it's looking for the exact text const editor. It doesn't care that const editor is then followed by the word project in this case. If I wanted to make sure that there was a white space after editor, I can just hit a space here. And now it's only going to show the results where const editor is followed by a space. Now let's actually look at the search results here. So again, this is a list of all the files and all the locations within those files that contain the text ABCD, which is what I typed up here. If I go and I browse through this list here, you can see that at the top level we have a list of files, so yarnlock, testutils.ts, emojis.json, and then below that we have a list of the different search results within those files. So if I click on one of them, we can actually view where that text is occurring. So here, ABCD is being highlighted by VS Code, and I was able to open that file just by clicking on it here. So I could just click on that search result. It is going to open that file and highlight the search result over in it as well. Next to the individual file names in the list here, you can also see that we have an indicator of how many search results are occurring in each one. So if I look at preview.ts here, for example, there's a nice 2. That is indicating that there are 2 search results in that file. Now if I go and I click on one of the search results here, so let's go over to completion.test.ts. I'll go and click on one of the results. Again, it is going to open up that file and then also go and highlight the current search result that I clicked on. In this case, it's kind of in a light bluish color. One of the other things you can note is that it is not just highlighting the current search result that I clicked on over here, it is actually going to highlight all of the search results in this file. So if we look up here, you can see that ABCD has been highlighted in this orangish color. Again, the colors might vary depending on your color theme. These are the other search results within the file that are occurring. So this is the one that I clicked on, and then here's the other search results being displayed within the file. And I can just kind of browse through the file here and look for this orangish colored text to find all the other occurrences of ABCD. Now, one useful trick is that you can actually look over here in the gutter as well to find these occurrences. And if you had the minimap enabled, you can see them in the minimap as well. So if I look over here in the gutter, notice how there are these orange blocks. That is indicating current search results. And if I go and I click down here, you can see that sure enough, right where I had the orange search results over here in the gutter, there's orange text being highlighted indicating the current workspace search results for ABCD. Now going back over to the search results themselves over here, if I wanted to, I could use the arrow keys to navigate through this list. So I could use the up and down arrows to just go through this list over here. You'll see it's jumping between the different search results. If I'm in a file itself, I can also use the focus next search result and focus previous search result commands to navigate through the individual search results here. So the default binding for this is F4, and that will go to the next search result. So I'll press F4 here. You can see that I'm currently on this, and then I'll press F4. It jumps to the next search result. I can just keep pressing F4 to jump through the different search results in the file. You also notice that the current search entry over here is being highlighted. And then to jump to the previous search result, so using the previous or focus previous search result command, I can use Shift F4. This will jump backwards through the search results instead of going forward. And this will even jump across files. So I'll go and navigate through here to find the last result in this file. And then watch, as soon as I pressed F4 that last time, it actually jumped over to a separate file. So I can use F4 to navigate through the entire list of search results. And then again, if I wanted to, I could just press Shift F4 to jump backwards through the list instead. Now, as we're looking at the list of search results over here, so let's go back to the search list. Let's say that I wasn't interested in the search results from a specific file. One option then is to go and collapse down the search results from that file. So here I can go to completions.test.ts here. And if I wasn't interested in them, I could go click on the little arrow icon here and collapse them down. I could also use the keyboard to do this. So let's say I had this entry focused. I could press up arrow until I'm focused on the entry in the list here, and then use the left arrow to go and collapse down the search results from that file. And that's just going to hide the results. Of course, I can then go and click on the little chevron again to expand those results and see them again. But this is letting me just quickly go and collapse down those results. Now, if I wanted to collapse down all the results, I can quickly do that by going up and clicking on the collapse all button up here. So when I do this, you can see it's collapsed down all of the search results in the file. I can see the number of entries in each case here. So I can look over at the right-hand side to see all the different entries in those files, but it has collapsed down the individual search results. When I'm then interested in one, I can just go and expand it. Or if I wanted to expand them all, I could go and click on the expand icon up here, and this will go and expand all the search results again to get our default view. Now, if you're really wanting to remove an entry from the search result list here, you can actually go and delete it as well. So let's go back to the completions.test.ts file here. And when I hover over this file, I can just go and click on the little X over here to remove all those search results from the current list. Now, don't worry, this is not going to modify the file. It's not going to prevent you from seeing that file again in the future. It is just removing that entry from the current search result list. And I could even go and delete individual search results within a file. So if, let's say I didn't like this search result, I can go and click the little X there, and now it's been removed. This is probably most helpful if you're wanting a stable list that you're kind of navigating through or keeping around as a reference. And it becomes useful, again, when we get into find replace in the current workspace as well. So you can just click these little X to go and remove search results. If I want to restore those search results, all I have to do is perform the same search again. So here, in this case, I have ABCD. I can just go focus on the text box here, press enter or return, and it's going to perform the search again. And you can see it's going to go back to 170 results. So it is no longer excluding the search results that I just deleted. As you're working, there might be cases where you want to go and view a previous workspace search as well. And in those cases, rather than typing out the search term again, you can use the workspace search history. So with the search box up here focused, I can just use the up arrow to go and view the history. So I can say up arrow here, and now it's going to navigate through my search history. So I can get back to ABCD, for example. If I wanted to go to newer entries in the history, I could then use the down arrow instead and navigate through things that way. As we've been looking at VS Code's search box, it might seem like we can only enter a single line of text, but that's not actually true. You can search for multiple lines of text pretty easily. So one way to do that, again, would be to go and copy and paste some code. So I could just go in here and copy and paste some code, go and paste that into the search box, and now it is searching for multiple lines of text. So that is one option. Of course, I could go and select the same code. So let me actually do a slightly different selection here, and then use the search in Workspace keyboard shortcut. So again, that is Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F. That would also populate the search box with multiple lines of text, but you can also enter multiple lines of text manually. To do that, you would start typing out the first line of text. So let's say I was searching for / to match like a JS doc comment. Now to create the next line of text, rather than hitting enter, because enter will go and perform the search, I'm going to hold shift and then press enter. and then enter the next line of text. You can see that I now am on the next line here. So I'll say another star to try to match some js.comments. And now I've been able to enter multiple lines of text here. You'll see that inside the search results, it has this little +1 next to all the different search results. That is indicating how many extra lines of text are being matched. And if I actually click on one of these search results here, you can see that it's highlighting the entire search term here. So it is matching over multiple lines. So again, you can enter multiple lines just by hitting Shift-Enter, which will enter a literal return instead of going and performing a new search. So you can enter as many new lines here as you want. And then you can navigate through those new lines using up and down arrow. Once you get to the top or bottom of the search results, hitting up arrow or down arrow will start navigating through the search history. So notice how my cursor is now at the very top of the search results. If I hit up arrow at this point, I'll start navigating through the search history. So I can just start going backwards, navigating through all my search results, and get back to some of the original search terms that we were looking at earlier. Up until this point, we've been performing basic text searches. So whatever we enter in the search result box here, that is the text that VS Code is going to search for. There's actually a few different search modes that you can use to control VS Code's behavior while searching for things. These modes are case sensitivity, match whole word, and then using regular expressions for search. Let's take a look at each of them. So the first one is using case sensitive searches or not. So let's go back here and actually search for A, B, C, D again. And if we look through the list of search results here, you'll see that by default, VS Code is finding both A, B, C, D in lowercase and then A, B, C, D in uppercase. So it is basically ignoring case when searching for things. If there are mixed case versions as well, it would find those as well. So it is not considering case when searching by default here. If we're instead interested in an A, B, C, D or in our search term with a specific type of casing, we can go and turn on case sensitivity. To do that, I can go to the search box up here and go over to the first option on the left-hand side here, or on the right-hand side of the search box, and turn on match case. So again, it's off by default. Once I've turned it on, you should see this highlighted, which is indicating that match case is now on. With match case enabled, VS Code will exactly match the text that you enter into the search box here. So right now I have lowercase a, b, c, d. Notice how all of the uppercase a, b, c, d's, those have all been excluded. If I was looking for something more specific, so I could say capital A, B, and then lowercase c, d, I can go and enter that. And again, VS Code is going to match the case and only find the search results with that specific form. There is also a useful trick that you can use to automatically enable case sensitivity without having to toggle it on and off every time. So here I'm going to turn off the case sensitive searching, go back here, clear my current search term, and let's open up the settings with Control comma or Command comma on Mac. And I'm going to search for smart case. And I want the search smart case setting here. Now, this is off by default, but once you turn this on, VS Code will try to enable case sensitivity depending on what you've typed in. So if you type in all lowercase letters, for example, it is going to do a case-insensitive search. So here I'll type in A, B, C, D. It is the same case-insensitive search we were getting before. Once I type in a capital letter, though, for example, it is going to turn on case-sensitive searching automatically. So here I'll say A, B. Notice how, because I've typed a capital letter, it is automatically enabled the case-sensitive searching. I did not have to toggle anything. It is now smart enough just to turn that on automatically. So this can save you some time. It's not going to work in every case, especially if you're wanting to find text that is matching the lowercase version here. You'd still have to toggle match case to exclude things like the uppercase A, B, C, D. But it is a useful shortcut, and you might want to consider turning it on if you're often needing to match case, especially when working with uppercase letters. The next search option we're going to look at is match whole word. And for this, let's do a new query. So I'm going to, in my search box here, type in file. And now we're seeing all the search results in the current workspace that contain the word file somewhere in there. And again, you can see all of these have file somewhere in their name. Now, if we're looking through the search results, though, you can see there's a few different forms of the word files. So in many cases, we actually have files, plural. Here we have file system provider. Here we have files again. Here's file on its own. Here's file on its own. So there's a few different ways that file is actually showing up. In some cases, you might want to only find the forms where the search term is showing up as its own word. So in this case, it would be the word file on its own, and not forms like files or profiler, which is probably not something that you'd expect. And that's where match whole word comes into play. This is going to limit the search terms to just cases where the word that you've typed in occurs on its own. This is the second option over here in the search options. So the one with the A, B, and then kind of the underscore under it. I'll turn on match whole word. And now with match whole word enabled, you can see there's many fewer search results. And if we look through the search results, again, it is just the word that we typed in here occurring on its own. So none of the plural forms, none of the forms where the word file is occurring as part of another word. It is just the word file occurring on its own. The final search option that we're going to talk about is regular expression searching. So this is again, a more advanced topic. I'm not going to cover how you can actually use regular expressions or what regular expressions are, but I'm going to show how you can actually use this. The way you can think about this is that it lets you perform fuzzy searches where, let's say I want to match the letters A and then some other letter and then B. I could do that using a regular expression search, and you can get very complicated. You can do a whole lot of very fancy things with them, but I'm just going to show some basic examples. So regular expression searches are, again, off by default, but you can turn them on just by going and clicking on the little dot star here over on the far right-hand side of the search box. So now it is searching in regular expression mode. Now, if you just type in letters, it is not going to be any different, but now you can start typing in regular expression patterns again. So let's go and type A, and we're going to search for anything that has A and then some letter and then C. So in that case, I'm going to do A dot, which stands for any letter in regular expression syntax, and then C. So now it has found all the instances where A and then some letter or some character and then C occurs. And if we look through the search results here, you can see that dot is standing in place for the letter C in this case, for the letter S in this case, for the letter N in this case. And we've been able to find all these search results across all these different files using that regular expression. So you can see how it's kind of a fuzzy search result in this instance. Now we could use more fancy filtering. So we could do something like, oh, let's only match A and then the letters B through N. And now it's only going to match the A followed by any letter that occurs between B and N. So you can use more fancy filtering if you're wanting to. I could say, oh, it has to be A and then any word character and then C. So the /W is going to stand for any word character. I can instead say, oh, it has to be A and then any space character. So /S is going to stand for any space character. And again, you can see it's matching all these different space characters here. And I could have any number of spaces if I wanted to. So I could say any number of space characters by adding a plus on there. So it's going to match multiple spaces. So there's a number of more fancy things that you can do as well. Again, to get the full power of regular expressions, you do need to know how regular expressions work. But once you understand them, they can be really invaluable because they let you match fuzzy text. And instead of having to think about matching specific terms, you can go and perform a fuzzy search and see all of the different search results. They're a quite powerful tool. VS Code supports pretty much all of the fancy regular expression things that you want. So forward look aheads, all of those fancy things. And we'll touch on them again once we get to search and replace within the current workspace. Now that we've seen how you can search through the entire contents of a workspace, let's look at how you can start scoping your search to a specific set of folders or excluding a specific set of folders from the search results. So here I'm going to do a basic search again. I'll say const editor, and you can see I have quite a few results showing up. I'm actually going to collapse down the results so we can look at some of the locations where these are coming from. So we have things in the build folder, we have things in the extensions folder, and then we have things in the source directory as well. Now let's say that I only want to see the search results that are coming from the extensions directory here. To do that, I can use the search includes. So I'm going to go over to my search box here and find the little ... right below it. Click on that, and it's going to show me the advanced search options. So now we have files to include, files to exclude. Again, that was by clicking on the little ... here. And if you ever want to hide these again, you can just go and click on that ... again. So here I'm going to keep them expanded. Now, files to include is a list of file patterns or glob patterns that are going to determine which files are included in the search results. So you can enter basic things like a file name. You could enter a glob if you wanted to. You can get pretty fancy with these. To start, let's just type in extensions to go and limit our search results to files that have extensions somewhere in their name. Now, if I go and I collapse down the search results, you can see that I've gone and eliminated the files that had that started with build. We just have things that have extensions somewhere in their file name. Now, if I look through the list, though, there's a few ones here that are showing up that maybe I wouldn't expect. So at the very bottom here, notice how I still have a few things coming up from the source directory. This is because, again, extensions is occurring somewhere within the file path. So just by typing up here by default in files to exclude or files to include, it is going to include any file that somewhere in its file path has the word extensions. So source contrib extensions here, that's why it's being included. If I wanted to limit my search results to just the extensions directory at the root of my workspace, I can instead update my files to include to say ./extensions. And that is going to anchor the search results at the root of the workspace. So now when I go and I collapse down the search results here, notice how all of them are only things that occur in that extensions directory. Now you can also use glob patterns in files to include to perform more fuzzy matching. So a common use case for this is matching any file that has a specific type of file extension. Here I'm going to update my search term, so let's just search for editor, and I'm going to get rid of my files to include for now. And if we look here, we have a bunch of different file types that are showing up. So we have everything from JSON to TypeScript files and JavaScript files. Let's say that I only wanted to see the results in JSON files, for example. Here in my files to include, I can use a glob pattern for that. So I'm going to say star.json. And now I've limited my search results to just files that end in .json. So this is matching every file that ends, that has any file name and then ends in .json here. And sure enough, when I go and I view my list, only the JSON files are showing up. Of course, I could also limit things to TypeScript, for example. So I could do star.ts, which is returning quite a few more results, but now I've limited it to TypeScript files. So this is a useful way if you're wanting to just search in files with a specific type of extension. The glob patterns can also get quite a bit more fancy though. So let's say that I want to find any file that has the word test somewhere in its path, but then also is a TypeScript file. So to get started here, I'm going to type test. So right now we're filtering things down to just files that contain test somewhere in the path. And then to start, I'll say / and then star.ts. Now this is going to only look for files that have test and then some file name and then end in .ts here. So we can see that this file matches because it is in the test directory and then has a name that ends in .ts. If I go and I collapse this, you can see all the other files here, but it's actually not finding everything that we might want. So let's say that we wanted the word test to occur anywhere within the file path. For that, I can instead insert another part here. So I'll say after test, I'll say /*. That ** is going to match any other number of path components. And you can see that after adding it, it is going to include a lot more files. So we have quite a few bit more search results that are now occurring. If I collapse them down, we can find cases where we have, let's go and find a good example here. So here you can see the file path includes the word test, but it's not actually the last section of the file path. So we have test/common and then the file name that ends in ts. So the ** here is matching, again, any number of path components, even potentially 0 path components. And then we're using the star.ts at the end to match on the file name. So you can get very fancy with your glob patterns. You can even enter multiple glob patterns if you're wanting to. So let's go back here and say we're going to search for any TypeScript file that is in the test.ts plus any JSON file that contains the word editor. I can just enter a comma here and then enter my new glob pattern or my new filter. So I'll say star.json. And now we should be seeing both the TypeScript and JSON files in the search results here. So if I go to the top, sure enough, we have the JSON files along with all of the TypeScript files that we're seeing before. So the comma is going to include any file that matches any of the different patterns in here separated by the commas. Oftentimes when you're working, you'll want to search within a specific directory of the workspace, and typing out the entire directory path can be kind of a pain. So here's a useful shortcut for avoiding having to do that. So I'm actually going to go and open this file here. So I'll say reveal in Explorer view just by right-clicking on the search result. And let's say that I want to search for something just within the Markdown Basics folder here. I can go and right-click on it and then say Find in Folder. And notice how VS Code has now automatically pre-populated the files to include section here with that folder name. So now I could type in editor, I could type in ABC, no results for that. I could do the letter A, for example. So it's automatically pre-populated that. Again, the way to get that was to right-click on a file or folder and say Find in Folder. And that will scope the search result automatically and fill in this files to include box. Now, naturally, the files to include also includes history. So if I go into the files to include box up here, and let's say I want to get back to my previous search filter, I could use the history just by hitting up arrow and down arrow to go and navigate through my previous files to include. So I can use it pretty much like the search editor or the search input text box where it has its own history as well to navigate through the files to include history. The last option I want to talk about for files to include is the Search in Open Editors option. So this is the little book option over here at the far right-hand side. So I'm actually going to open up a editor here. And now watch what happens when I turn on the Search Only in Open Editors option. I'm actually going to clear out this current filter and then go and click on this little book icon that says Search Only in Open Editors. With this, it's instead of searching the entire workspace, VS Code is only going to search in editors that have a current tab open. So I have this one file open. You can see that the search results are limited to just that one file. This is useful if you're wanting to scope your search results to just the files that you've been actively working with. So it's probably not something you want to keep on all the time, but it can be useful in certain situations. Now that we understand files to include, files to exclude is pretty self-explanatory. So here we're specifying the files that we don't want to show up in the search results instead of specifying the files that we do want to be included. And again, you can use glob patterns and all the other fancy things that we just learned about for files to include. So let's say, for example, I want to exclude anything that occurred inside the build directory here. In files to exclude, I could just go and type build, and now it's going to exclude any file that has build somewhere in its path. Now again, the one thing to remember with this is that it's going to look for the word build anywhere within the file path by default. If I want to exclude just the top level build directory, I'd have to say /build. And that will go and make sure we're just excluding that one directory instead of potentially having some unexpected false positive that would also be excluded. Now, of course, we can go and use our fancy glob patterns. So let me kind of tweak the search here to just search for editor. Let's say I want to exclude all of the TypeScript files here. I could just say star.ts. And this is going to exclude every TypeScript file. If we look through the list, we shouldn't see any TypeScript files anymore. And I could even use more fancy regular or glob patterns and comma separated, multiple patterns as well in the files to exclude setting. So you can apply all the different techniques we learned about for files to include to files to exclude as well. The files to exclude setting is also a good point to bring up something that I've kind of been glossing over, and that is that by default, VS Code is not actually going to search through your entire workspace. It will search through all of the files and kind of what you would typically think about as the workspace, but it doesn't search through every single file that it finds. It's excluding things like the node modules, the .git directory, for example, any hidden folders, and that is usually the behavior that you want, because typically you don't want to search through the node modules. It's going to be quite slow, and the search results there are typically not interesting. Now that is VS Code's default behavior, but if you wanted to, you can actually go and disable that. So let's go and perform a search for something like for space and then open paren to search for things that sort of look like for loops. Let's say that we now wanted to really find every single occurrence of this text within the workspace and search everything, including the node modules file, just search everywhere no matter what. I can go to files to exclude here and go turn off the use include or use exclude and ignore files here. So if I turn the setting off, it is now going to search through everything inside the workspace. You can see the search is going to take quite a bit longer to actually go and find the results because it is searching through node modules. It is going to find a lot more results as well. So you can see we're already up to 15,000 or so. And it is, again, searching through every single file in the workspace. Now, it might seem kind of odd that VS Code's workspace search is just silently excluding things by default, but if you think about it, it really is typically the behavior that you want. So when you're searching through your workspace, typically you only care about code that you actually own, not things under node modules. It's going to take a lot longer to search through the node modules, for example, and oftentimes the results aren't very helpful. But if you ever do need to search through everything, you can always go and turn off this option, and then you would be able to see the results under node modules. So here I could go and browse and see the result here in this TypeScript file. Probably not something I care about typically, but there are instances where you do want to just search everything. Now that we know VS Code is silently excluding some files and folders automatically, the natural follow-up question is, where is that list coming from? So if we hover over the option here that says use exclude settings and ignore files, we sort of have a hint. So the files that are being excluded automatically are coming both from the settings, and then they're also being picked up from things like the git ignore file. Now, the settings means that we can actually go and configure the default set of ignored files. We could go and add new ones or remove VS Code's default ones if we wanted to. Let's go and open up the settings by pressing Control comma or Command comma on Mac to take a look at that. So over here in my settings, I'm going to search for search exclude, and I want the search exclude setting here. Now, if we read the description of the search exclude setting, you can see that this is a list of glob patterns that are going to be excluded by default from both Workspace Search and Quick Open. You can also see that it mentions that it inherits all the glob patterns from this other setting here, which is the files exclude setting. That's what hides files within the Explorer, for example. So typically if something's hidden within VS Code's Explorer, you also don't want it to show up in the Workspace Search. If we look at the individual glob patterns here, you can see things like node modules are being excluded, and we can go and remove these if we wanted to, or we could go and add a new pattern. So let's go add a new pattern to start with. So I'll say add pattern here, and I'll say build. So let's say we wanted to exclude the build directory. Now if I go and I perform the search again, so I'll focus on the search box, hit enter or return, you can see that the build directory has just automatically been excluded. I didn't have to enter anything in files to exclude here, and because I configured this as a user setting, the build directory is going to be excluded across all different workspaces that I work in, so that's kind of a useful thing to do. Now let's say that I want to remove something from the search exclude list. So if I wanted to remove the entry I just added, I can go and hover over it in the list here, so build, go over to the far right side here, click on the little X, and now build will start being included in searches again. So if I focus on the search box here, press enter to do a new search, now we should see that build is being included again here. Yep, sure enough, there it is. Now, if we're wanting to include the node modules here, so we could go over to Search Exclude and say, let's go and include the node modules directory. So I'll click on the little X here, and now it's been removed from the Search Exclude setting. But when I go in and perform the search, you'll notice that the node modules directory is still not showing up. So this gets into the second point of where VS Code is picking up the Search Exclude. So we have the Search Exclude setting here, but then it's also picking them up from your git ignore file or other ignore files that it's finding. We can also turn off that behavior if we're wanting to. So let's go and in the settings here, search for search, and instead of search exclude, I'm going to say search ignore. And you can see there's a few options here related to ignore files. The one that is enabled by default is search use ignore files. So this means that VS Code is going to look at your git ignore file when determining what files should be excluded from Workspace Simple Search. Once I go and I turn this off and then perform a search, now we should see that VS Code is searching through the node modules files as well. So let me go and collapse down some of these search results here. And sure enough, you can see that we have things coming from under the node modules directory. Again, that is because we both disabled search use ignore files, and then we also disabled the or removed node modules from the search exclude list within the search exclude setting there. So you do have a lot of control over what VS Code is going to ignore. The option here where you can say use exclude and ignore files, that is a useful shortcut for just disabling all of those and searching through the entire workspace. But if you wanted to, you could go and configure things to have a little bit more control and really configure things for your specific setup. At this point, we should have a pretty good sense of how you can search within a workspace in VS Code. So we've really looked at all the different search options, including and excluding files, some of the settings related to search as well, navigating through search results. Let's now look at how you can do search and replace within the current workspace. And this is going to use a lot of the knowledge that we're using before, but now applying it to go and update files in the workspace instead of just going and viewing the search results. Let's use Workspace Find and Replace here to do some basic refactoring. So in my search box, I'm going to type in for, then space, and then open paren, and then var. This is going to find all of the classic JavaScript style loops where it's using the var keyword. Now this might be an opportunity to go and update these to use the let keyword. And to do that, I'm going to go and open up the Find and Replace view in my search view here. So right next to the search box that we've been interacting with, you'll notice this little chevron. I'm going to click on that, and now we have the replacement text here as well. So this is a new text box that I can enter in text that is going to replace the current find result. So over here, I'll enter for, and then space, and then paren, and then let. Now, if we look at the search results, VS Code has helpfully updated them to show what the replacement would look like. So we can see for var here, that is what we were searching for, and then what it is being replaced with, which is for let. If I actually click on one of these, we can see the edit as well. So here we see a diff that is showing here's what the new replacement text is going to look like. At this stage, though, the text has not actually been replaced. We have just gone and we're getting a preview of what the replacement would look like. So you can see replace preview. Again, we have not actually updated any files at this point. If we do want to go and update the file, let's say we want to update this one instance, I can just click on the little icon over here, which is going to accept the current replacement. So I can say replace, and now that file has gone and had the replacement applied to it. I can confirm that by looking over in my source control view, and if I click on the diff here, you can see that sure enough, we've now actually applied the replacement to the text within the file and the file on disk. Let's go back to the search results view. So if I wanted to, I could go through and review each of these, click on the little icon over here to accept the replacement. But if I think everything looks good, I can quickly accept all of the replacements by going up to the search box here and saying replace all. This is going to apply the replacements to all of the search results that we have down here. So all 96 results. So I'll go and do this. And it's making sure that, yes, I want to replace all of them. So I'll say replace here. And now all of these instances have had let or var replaced with let. Again, I can go to my source control view to actually confirm this. So I can see that sure enough, all of these instances have var, and it's been replaced with let. Now, this is a good point to revisit something that might not have seemed too useful when I originally introduced that, which was deleting search results. So let's look through our search results here, and we can see that we have a bunch of search results in this loader file, for example. And let's say that we want to replace all of the text in the workspace except for the text in this loader file here. Now to do that, I can go and just remove it from the search result list here. So I'll click on the little X icon over here. Now I've removed that file from the search results. I could also go and if I wanted to remove individual instances from the search result list here. Now once it's no longer in the search result list, I can do replace all. And replace all is now going to affect every file except the ones that I went and deleted myself. So if I search for var again, we should see that loader file is showing up because I removed it from the original set of search results that we did replace all on. So it makes sense, and it's a useful way to exclude a specific file from the replacement options. As you would expect, the replace text box works pretty much like the search text box as well. So it has history, and it also can do multi-line text. So if we wanted to look at the history, let me just enter something else in here. So I'll do something like for const. And let's say, oh, no, that's actually not right. I want to enter my previous search replacement instead. I can just hit up arrow at this stage. This is going to let me navigate through the search history. So I can just kind of navigate through things here using the up and down arrow to navigate through the search history. Again, the search preview here is going to be updated as I'm navigating through things. So we do have a search or a replacement history there as well. You can also enter multi-line text. So let's say that I want to enter a new line within my replacement here. I can hit Shift Enter, and this is going to enter a new line in the replacement. Now I can see this if I go and I actually expand one of the replacements here. So I'll expand the diff. You can see that sure enough, it has gone and created a new line within the replacement here. So you can have both new lines within the search text and in the replacement text just by hitting Shift Enter or copy and pasting code that happens to have a new line within it. Now, one thing to keep in mind when doing a find replace in the workspace is that by default, VS Code will use the exact text that you put into the replace box as the replacement. So let's search for something like override. And you can see that I have a mix of lowercase override, uppercase override. If I then type in the replacement, so I'll say something like that, OVR, notice how the uppercase override is being replaced with the lowercase OVR. And that, again, is because VS Code is going to use the exact text that you put into the replacement box. If I don't like that behavior and I want to try to preserve the case of the original text, I can go into the replacement box here and say preserve case. With this option, VS Code will try to be smart about preserving the case. So if I go to the option or the edit here, for example, notice how because it had an uppercase override, it is now replacing it with an uppercase OVR. So it is trying to be a little bit smart about replacing things. It's not always going to get it right. So this is not always going to be reliable. But if you have things like a word that is starting with a capital letter, for example, it should typically get that right. If you have things that are like all uppercase, for example, it should be pretty smart about that as well. It's a useful option if you're wanting to replace a word that is occurring as part of something that's like camel case, for example, where it could either be at the start and start with a lowercase letter, or it could be part of the middle humps in the camel case word and would start with a capital letter. So you can use this preserve case option just in the replacement box for that. Find and replace in Workspace probably gets most interesting when you start working with regular expressions. So here I'm going to turn on regular expression search mode, and I'm going to search for something like custom, and then I'm going to say /W, so that's going to match any word character. I'm going to match multiple of those with the plus, and then say editor. And you can see I have these 82 results that are showing up. So things like custom read-only editor and then custom text editor. Now, if we had a replacement, I could do something like custom blah editor. But it's always going to apply the exact same replacement to all of the search terms here. So you can see that both text and then the custom read-only editor, they have the exact same edit that's being applied. So that's the default behavior. Now, because this is a regular expression, though, I can start getting a little bit more creative. So I can actually start using things that were captured as part of the regular expression in the replacement itself, which becomes very interesting. So one of the most basic use cases for this is I can reference the entire replaced word. So I could do something like $0. And this is just going to replace the replaced word with itself. So in this case, let's say I want to prefix all of the search terms that I found with the word blah. So when I click on this, notice how it's gone and added the word blah to all of them. So just kind of regardless of what is being replaced. So this is not the most fancy example of what you can do with this, but it is showing how I could use $0 to match the entire matched term from that regular expression up there. Where this becomes more interesting, though, is that you can actually start referencing individual capture groups inside the regular expression. So here I'm going to create a capture group. So now I have a single capture group that is going to match that middle word. And I can now reference these different capture groups by index. So again, the syntax for this is $, and then the index of the capture group starting at 1. So if I just said $1 here, notice how the replacement text is now the capture group. So in this case, it was matching custom read-only and then editor. Notice how it's just using read-only as the replacement for the replacement text here. And then for text, it is using text because it has removed those other two parts and is just using the capture group from the /W+. In this instance, I could use these capture groups to go and reorder the words here. So instead of custom and then read-only or text editor, I could say read-only or text and then custom editor and just mix things up that way. And you can again see the preview that is being updated here. And we were able to move that word, whatever was occurring in the middle between custom and editor, to the start of things. So it's just kind of shifting everything around. Again, these regular expressions can get quite complicated and you can mix and match them. You can do look aheads, look behinds, you can do all sorts of crazy things. But the key thing to remember is that in the replacement here, use the $ and then the index of the capture group that you want to reference as the replacement. And you can actually perform surprisingly powerful refactorings and kind of changes inside the workspace using these regular expressions find replaces. One even more advanced thing that you can start doing is capitalizing or lowercasing the different capture groups here. So again, let's use the current example where we have the first capture group being moved to the start of the word. Let's say that I want to actually make that lowercase. I could use \L, and that is going to lowercase the first letter here. So you can see how read-only has actually become lowercase, even though here in the original text it was uppercase. Now, if I want to make something uppercase, I could use /U. That is going to capitalize the first letter. Now, if you want to make the entire capture group lowercase or uppercase, you can just use the uppercase U or uppercase L. So if we want to capitalize the entire capture group here, I could use uppercase U. So again, it's /U with an uppercase U. Now it is making that entire capture group uppercase. Make everything lowercase, I could do a \, and then a uppercase L. And that again is applying to the entire capture group, whereas the lowercase versions are just applying to the first letter in that capture group. Before moving on to search editors, let's talk about how you can have the search view show in different locations. So this is useful if you're wanting the search view to show up in the secondary sidebar, for example, or down in the panel. And there, it's very easy to go and configure things. This gets a little bit into the workbench layout, but search is something that you'd often want to move around. So I think it's worth including in this video. So again, by default, the search editor and the search view is going to show up in the activity bar over here. If I wanted to move it to the secondary activity bar or to the secondary sidebar, I can just click and drag on the search icon up here in the activity bar. So I'm clicking and dragging. I'll go over to the opposite side and I'm going to just drag and drop it to the opposite side of my window. And now I have the search view permanently showing up in the secondary sidebar over on this side. So this is useful because I can have my Explorer visible on one side and then my search view permanently visible on this side. And you might want to have this layout if you like always having your search view be visible. Of course, you can go and collapse down this view if you wanted to, so I could hit the little X icon here. Then to go and reveal that secondary sidebar again, I could either use Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F, which would open up the Workspace Search view, or I could actually use from the command palette, which I'd open with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, toggle secondary sidebar. That would open up the sidebar. The search one would just always open up the search view, no matter what is actually in the secondary sidebar. It would just always go to that search view. Now, you can also go and move the search view down into the panel if you wanted to. So here I'm going to actually click and drag here. Let me actually open up the panel to start with. So here I have my standard panel view. And I'm going to go and click and drag on the search icon again. And I could also click and drag from the activity bar. And now I'm going to drag it down into the panel. So I'm going to put it down here instead. And now you can see I have a new search entry down here in the panel. Now this is going to work pretty much the same as the search view did over in the sidebars. So it's going to be the exact same functionality. It is just now going to display in the panel. The benefit is that you have a lot larger area to view the search results in. So I'll say const editor here, for example, and notice how I have just much more space to go and view the search results, especially if I go and collapse down the advanced options here. So I can really get more sense of the context of each of these lines here and navigate through things here. So you might prefer that you like having the search results down here in the panel because you have more space to work with. You might like having them over here in the secondary sidebar, for example, because then you can always have the search editor be visible. Those are just a few other options that you have when configuring where the search view is going to show up. For now, I'm going to move it back to its default location just by clicking and dragging and putting it back into the activity bar. Search editors take things a step further by showing the search results in the normal editor area. So there, you can use them in addition to the normal search view that you have over on the sidebar or down in the panel. Or you could actually use them as the primary way of searching things. So let's say that I was searching for something like const editor again. And here I have my list of search results. But again, because it's over here in the sidebar, it's a little bit hard to actually view all of the results and get a full list of them. That's where search editors become quite useful. So up here, where we have the list of search results, there's a little button that says open in editor. And if I click on this, it's going to open these search results in a new search editor. So I'm going to hide the sidebar over here just by clicking on the search icon so we have more space. And you can see that in VS Code's normal text editor area, we now have a standard search editor. And this is showing the exact same search results that we had before. So you can see 1,061 results across 315 files, but it's now presented in this full width editor, giving us a lot better context on what each of the search results looks like. I can just scroll through this list, and it has a slightly different format where we can see we have the file names up here, and then each of the individual search results in the file below it. Let's find a file that has 2 occurrences. So this file, for example, has 2 occurrences of const editor. The line numbers are displayed over on the left-hand side. And what's nice is that we're also able to see some extra context around each of these search results here. So not only do we have the nice full width editor area to view the search results in, we can also get a little bit more information about what the rest of the file looks like around that search result. Now, if I'm interested in one of these search results, I can just go and double click on the line here. So let's go and double click on this one, for example. That is going to open the line and place my cursor right where I double clicked in the search results editor. Now, the search editor is not actually just a static list of results. It is going to behave just like the normal search widget or the search view was on the side. So we can actually go and type in the search box up here to go and continue refining things. So instead of const editor, I'm going to add an S on the end. And now we're only seeing occurrences of const editors. So this is a live list, and I can just go and type in whatever I want. So I could do ABCD, for example. And now we're seeing those same results we were seeing much earlier in the video here. And I can even use the find history just by using the up arrow key or the down arrow key to navigate through my history. We can even access all of the different search modes. So we have things like match case, match whole word, and regular expression search. Those are all available. And if I click on the little ... here, you even get the files to include and files to exclude. So this is really the exact same search experience, but now in a full width editor area. So you can even use this as a replacement for the search view. And I'll share a setting that lets you enable the search editor by default in a moment here. So as we saw, one way to open a search editor is to actually go from the search view on the side and say open an editor. So before we were saying open an editor in this link. You can also open a search editor directly. So to do that from the command palette, which I'll open with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, I'll say search editor, and I want the search editor, new search editor feature here. When I run this command, you can see it's opened up a blank search editor, and I can just type in my search term. So I can say it's const editor, and now it's going to perform the same search that we were doing before, again with all the controls that we're used to. As we were looking at the different search options over here, so like case sensitivity or regex search, you might have noticed in the search editor that there are these 2 other boxes as well. So there's the one here that has a 1 in it, and then this box on the far right-hand side. And these actually control the presentation of these search results. So the 1 is controlling the number of context lines that are shown around each search result. So that is the additional lines around each of the actual matched terms here. In this case, you can see we have 1 additional line, 1 before, and 1 after each of the search results. Let's say that I want to see a lot of additional context. I can just go over here to the arrows, hit the up arrow a few times, and now we're showing 4 lines before and 4 lines after each search result. VS Code is still helpfully highlighting the actual search result itself, so that is at the center, but now we have a lot more context so we can understand where the search term is occurring in the file. Now, if I want to quickly turn off all of the context lines, I could also click on the little toggle over here, which will go and hide the context lines. So that lets me quickly turn them off, but once I turn them back on again, I can use the arrows here and the numbers to control the number of context lines that are going to be shown. So you might want to increase this if you want more context, or decrease this if you're wanting to just see the search term itself. One very neat feature of search editors is that you can actually save them into your workspace as well. So let's go and search for things that look like to-do comments, for example. So I'll say to-do and then colon, which is kind of the typical format for our to-do comments in this workspace. You can see I have a bunch of results here. This is a useful query because I might want to view all the to-do comments again in the future. And to go and do that easily, I can just save my current search editor. So I'll use Control-S or Command-S to go and save the current file. And now it's gone and it's asking me where I want to save this. So let's go and I'll navigate to the top level of my workspace here. So I'll say VS Code, which is the current directory, and I'll enter the search term. So I'm going to save this as to-do, or the file name here. So I'll save this as to-do. And now I've actually saved this file into my workspace. Now I can go and find this file in the workspace. So you can see in my source control view, there is a to-do.codesearch file. And inside of my workspace itself, so let's go scroll down to the top level of the workspace, you can see that this to-do.codesearch file has been saved. Now when I open this file, it is going to open up the search editor again and perform that same search. There are a few reasons why you might actually want to save a search editor like this. So the first one is that you can just quickly perform the same search again by opening up the file. The other reason is that you could actually check in the code search file so that other people on your team could go and view it. So if you're all wanting to tackle these to-dos, for example, you might check in the to-do code search here so that anybody on your team can open it up and start going through these to-do comments. So they are useful, and being able to save the search results like this is a quite useful functionality to have as well. Once you start using search editors, you might find that you prefer using them for all your searches. And it's actually very easy to make VS Code's standard search key binding go and open a search editor instead of opening the search view. So you can see I have my search editor currently open. Let's go and close this. And I'm going to open up my settings with Control comma or Command comma on Mac. I'm going to search for search mode. I want the search mode setting here. Now this is controlling where VS Code will show search by default. So the default location is the search view, as you can see here. And then we have two other options. The first one is reuse editor, and then there's also new editor. So let's go to reuse editor first. This means that when you press the standard Workspace Search keyboard shortcut, which is Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F, it is going to try to find an existing search editor, and if none exists, it will create a new search editor. So here I'm going to say Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F, and you can see it's opened up a search editor here. I'll search for something like foo, and you can see I have my search results showing up. Now I'll switch back to another file, and if I press Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F again here, notice how it's gone back to that original search editor. So it's trying to reuse the search editor that I already have open. But again, the important part here is it did not actually open up the search view over on the side. It's always going to try to use a search editor. Now the other option here, instead of reuse editor, I could say new editor. And with new editor, VS Code is always going to try to create a new search editor. So again, I can do the same thing. I'll go back to this JSON file. I'll say Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F to do a workspace search. And notice how a new search editor has opened up. Now we actually have the two different search editors open currently. This can get a little bit overwhelming, I find, if you're not closing the search editors all the time. But it can be useful if you're wanting to make sure that you're always preserving your previous searches. The last thing that I want to talk about with search editors is the search editor apply changes extension. So this is getting into something that's quite a bit more advanced, and it is letting you use search editors to go and actually edit code. Now this is cool because it lets you use things like multiple cursors across different files. It is an extension that you need to install, so go to the marketplace and install the search editor apply changes extension. But let's go back to a search editor here. So here I have my standard search editor. Again, I'm going to search for something simple like const editor. And now I'm going to go into the search results here. And again, this is just a standard text editor, so I can actually start typing and doing things like that. Now I'm going to highlight some words here and use a command like select all occurrences. So that would be Control-Shift-L or I think Command-Shift-L on Mac. You can see I've created all these different cursors. And I'm going to say editor foo, just start typing here. And now I'm going to go and, whoops, don't mean to save that. And now I've gone and updated everything. At this point, I can go and use the apply changes command. So that is being contributed by the extension. I'm going to open up the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and say apply changes. And you can see apply search editor changes to workspace. What this command is going to do, it is going to take any of the changes that I've made inside of the search editor itself and apply them to the real files inside the workspace. So I'll say apply search editor changes to workspace. You can see it's working behind the scenes here to actually apply those changes. And after giving it a moment to complete here, you can see that it has now gone and actually applied all these changes. So it's opened up all the individual editors here. Then I can click over onto my source control view and see that sure enough, it has gone and applied all of the changes that I made. So that's a really cool functionality or really cool feature. You can just go and perform edits using multiple cursors inside the search editor itself. Obviously, this is not a valid edit because it is going and producing some errors here, but it lets you use things like multiple cursors across files. So that extension, again, it is called Search Editors Apply Changes, really is a fun one to use in combination with the search editors, and it's letting you do like find replace using search editors essentially. Well, I hope this video has been a good introduction to Workspace Search and VS Code. I think we've covered quite a lot of ground here. So starting with the basics of like how do you do just a simple Workspace Search in VS Code to more advanced things like matching case sensitivity or doing a regular expression-based search. We looked at how you can navigate through the search results. So using just by clicking on the search results list over here or using F4 or Shift F4 to actually navigate through the different search results. Then we got into using ignore files and how you can include and exclude specific files from Workspace Search and some of the settings that are controlling that. We also looked at how you could do a find replace in the workspace, including some more advanced options using regular expressions for find replace and capture groups, and even changing the casing of your find and replace results and those capture groups. After that, we quickly touched on how you can move the search view around, so moving it to the sidebar or down into the panel, before moving on to search editors and some of the search options there. So taking everything we learned and now applying it to that full width editor, and how you could save the search editor into your workspace. Just a lot of different options. And then finally going into a really advanced use case, which is letting you use multiple cursors and making text edits across multiple files with the search editor apply changes extension. It's a lot of ground, but I hope that you've learned a lot along the way. My hope is that this video, if you are just getting started with VS Code, really provided a good introduction of what's possible and gave you some ideas of how you might be able to use Workspace Search. And then if you're a more advanced user, I hope that you've learned a few things along the way. I haven't touched on everything related to search. Like there's a lot of different settings related to search, but they just it's too much to include in the video, and I don't think they're always that interesting. So it doesn't cover quite everything in this video, but it's already getting too long, so I figured I'd leave them out. So let me know if you found this video helpful, and also if there's another area you'd like to see a code 0 to 20 on in the future. Thanks, and happy searching.